With the transition, incorporation, and growth of analytics in NBA basketball, the way players approach the game has been increasingly methodical, whether it's cross-matching schemes on the defensive end or higher-paced perimeter-based basketball on the offensive end. With this, the term heliocentric began to be used when describing a certain type of offensive player, and that is usually a player who the offense is ran through. They're responsible for scoring and playmaking, and this form of offense has become increasingly popular in modern NBA offenses, though players with these playstyles are often subject to criticism on whether this is conducive for winning. Some of the most notable heliocentric players in the newer generation of the NBA are players such as Luka Doncic and Trae Young. These players have run offenses in which they're surrounded by role players, particularly shooters, and they spend a great deal of time with the ball, dictating how the possession is going to go. Basically, the team almost lives and dies with their decisions on offense. They're responsible with generating their teammates' open shots, generating their own shots, and you'll generally see their teammates attempting to get the ball back to them in order to save the possession. James Harden, specifically, is one of the first players that was often referred to as having a heliocentric playstyle while playing for the Rockets, due to his ISO-heavy style of play, and he's usually who many compare with Luka Doncic in terms of how they play. From 2016 all the way until 2022, Harden led the league in isolation possessions per game, establishing himself as one of the greatest ISO players in NBA history. To put into perspective how often he ISO'd, Luka Doncic led the league in isolation possessions this season with 7.3 a game. Russell Westbrook was second in isolation possessions in 2020 with 7.4, right behind James Harden. Those two seasons for Westbrook and Luka would be the most isolation possessions for a non-Harden player since its tracking in 2016. James Harden's career high in isolation was in 2019 with 16.4 per game and a 49% frequency. In 2020, it was 14.1 per game with a 45% frequency. This would mean he was isolating for nearly 50% of the time he attempted to score. And due to his lack of a championship, this brand of basketball has been deemed unsuitable for the best player on a championship level team. Let's take a trip back to the 2018-19 season, one of the best scoring seasons for a player in NBA history. Harden had 9 total 50-plus point games, with 2 60-point games, and even a month where he averaged over 40 points per game. Starting with the Rockets' second round matchup against the Golden State Warriors in Game 1, 3 minutes into the game, Harden launches up a heavily contested step-back 3 with 15 seconds remaining on the shot clock and doesn't knock it down. On the next possession, he looks to get matched up on Curry, hits him with his signature size up into another contested step-back 3, doesn't get it to go. You'll frequently find him sitting near the logo when he doesn't have the ball, which can make it easier for his defender to send help onto other offensive players. Here's another play where he isos Kevin Durant, attacks his top foot to go downhill, but Durant immediately rotates his body, gets in front of the ball, and Harden can do nothing but toss up a shot, and it misses. In his next possession, he calls for a screen, and before waiting for Nene to roll so he can make a play, he attempts to split the screen, but loses the ball, and that's another turnover. Finally, we have a possession where he gets double drag screens, and while he makes the shot, you can see over the course of the game that he has to consistently produce elite shot creation game to game with this playstyle. The ball is constantly in his hands, most of his shots are taken in traffic, and more often than not does this result in very inefficient games. When you're tasked with doing everything on offense, it is much easier for defenses to worry about that specific player, as shot variation from spot-up shooters can differ from game to game, so while one player is constantly spending time with the ball, it's easier to send more bodies and forcing other players to beat you. Let's take a look at another player in Russell Westbrook, who has the highest usage rate in playoff history with 47%, 7 points above second place. In 2017, it was understandable why he had the ball in his hand so much. There weren't many creators on the team, there was extremely bad spacing, and there wasn't anyone who could consistently control the offense. We'll take a look at some possessions during the Thunder's Game 1 against the Rockets. An average half-court possession can look like this, where the main goal is to get the ball back into Westbrook's hands so he can make a play. And there's consecutive possessions where it's either Westbrook taking the shot or a teammate taking the shot from a pass from him. The majority of plays from the team are created by him as a sole player, and from the 7-minute mark to the 2-minute mark, there is not a single Thunder possession in which there isn't either a shot attempt by Westbrook, a shot attempt after a pass from Westbrook, or a turnover. Now, heliocentrism doesn't always have to be looked at negatively. A player like Nikola Jokic could be considered a heliocentric player. Each and every part of the offense is run by him. He's constantly setting screens, he can receive the ball for only a few seconds before dishing it off, or he can even look to score, and he does this without spending most of the shot clock dribbling the ball, hence why he led the league in touches per game this season, despite being 36 in time of possession a game and nowhere near the top in average seconds per touch. He can catch the ball in the short roll and is quick to recognize lapses in the defense, and his reaction speed is second to none as he's able to make nearly perfect reads out of the post. Now, while there is no direct stat that represents heliocentrism, a stat you could use is usage rate, which is the percentage of a team's possessions that end with that player. And this can mean a shot attempt, an assist, and even a turnover. Heliocentric players often carrying scoring and playmaking responsibilities, and they often have a high usage rate. Now, throughout history, we've seen many players with absurdly high usage rates, with the highest being Russell Westbrook with a 41.7 in his 2017 MVP season. What I'm going to do is establish a baseline for heliocentrism and compare that with win shares, a stat that attempts to capture the overall contribution a player brings to a team's ability to win. Of course, keep in mind that most if not all advanced stats are not entirely reliable. The baseline I'll start off with is a usage rate of 35% or higher, with a minimum minutes requirement to filter out stats in garbage time. With this, there was a total of 37 different seasons in NBA history where a player had at least a 35% usage. There are doubles here and there, with Luka Doncic and Allen Iverson being tied with the most seasons suiting this criteria, with 5 each. Michael Jordan led these players in win shares with 16.7 during this 1987 season. What you notice is that a lot of the players on this list being some of the greatest scorers such as Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, and you see more of the pure scorer archetype in the players whose offense is split between scoring and playmaking. You might notice that there's no Trae Young, who I mentioned earlier as heliocentric, and that's because he missed the 35% criteria by 0.1 in his 2020 season. Now, as you can see, usage rate does not encapsulate every heliocentric player. Someone like Jokic, who is involved in this type of offense, is not here, and another player like LeBron, who has been heliocentric for the majority of his career, is not here either, with his highest usage rate being in the 2009 season with 33.8. Now, let's try filtering out the list a little. When you filter out for players who made the playoffs, 10 players are removed. Next, let's filter out for players that made it out of the conference to the NBA Finals. Now there's only one player left, and that is Allen Iverson during the 2001 NBA season, where his 76ers would lose to the Lakers in the finals. If you filter for players who won the championship, there's no one left, meaning no player with a usage rate of 35% or more in the regular season has ever won a championship. The highest usage rate to win a championship is Michael Jordan in 1993 with 34.7. The next 4 behind that are all Michael Jordan, with the highest usage rate for a non-Jordan player to win a championship being Giannis Antetokounmpo with a 32.5 usage rate in the 2021 NBA season. In the playoffs, for players who have at least played 25 minutes per game, there are 55 instances where players averaged at least a 35% usage, which is to be expected because it is the playoffs, but only in 5 of these instances did they win the championship, with 4 of them being Michael Jordan in 92, 93, 97, and 98, and the only other player being Hakeem Olajuwon in 95. Luka Doncic in the 2021 season was second in all-time usage in the playoffs with 40.4, and is also third, having a 40.4 usage again in the 2022 playoffs. I personally am someone that does not believe that just because something has not happened, that it is impossible. We have already seen someone like James Harden be one game away from the finals despite being one of the most ball-dominant players the NBA has ever seen. The question is whether this is a formula that can consistently be used for an NBA offense. The reason why the James Harden Rockets were so successful with this style of play is due to how effective he was with his quick first step, unreal shot-making ability, and his foul-drawing adeptness. A problem that can occur come playoff time is that this reliance on unbelievable shot-making, which doesn't generate the most quality of shots, can result in many games where the shot just won't fall, and especially in the playoffs where teams are game planning against you in a 7-game series, defenses will be much more tougher than the regular season. This season, Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks have made it all the way to the conference finals, and this heliocentric playstyle once again stands face to face with the door to the finals. If they win this series against the Minnesota Timberwolves, he will be the first player with over a 35% usage in the regular season to make the finals since Allen Iverson, joining him as the only players with over a 35% usage to ever make the finals since usage was being tracked. While heliocentrism is often 4 role players surrounding a star, it can also be 3 players revolving around 2 stars, such as James Harden and Chris Paul, or Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. While there are many possessions where Kyrie is doing his thing, more often than not, the offense is ran through the main guy, Luka Doncic, and whether this is a bad thing or not is up to you to decide. This season, Luka led the league in points created per game, and he ranked 4th all-time in points plus assists per game with 43.7, behind Wilt Chamberlain, who had 2 seasons with more, and Nate Archibald. As a player, many of his possessions involve him taking pull-up jumpers, step-back threes, and him overall taking many seconds to break down the defense, dictating their pace with a slower dribbling bag than his other ball-dominant counterparts. He often has to deal with dribbling with multiple defenders in the vicinity, blitzes on the screen, and off-ball defenders face guarding him to prevent him from getting the ball. Out of any player currently in the NBA, media critics have plastered the quote-unquote not a winning player label onto Luka, as past examples have shown that most heliocentric guards are hard to build around, and there can be many downsides to this style of play, since many of them are not good off-ball players. He's been labeled as a ball hog, someone who only puts up numbers, but it doesn't contribute to winning. But perhaps he is breaking that mold, showing that while it can be difficult to build around and win with that style, it is possible as long as you have the right pieces, you're willing to sacrifice, and if you have a little luck on your side, as most champions do. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe, and I hope you'll await my next video. Later.